Welcome, everyone. I'm Lisa Sabatini, the editor of Insider Reviews, where we test and write about pet products that run the spectrum from dog food to toys to pet tech. Today, we're here to talk about the humanization of pets and its economic, social, and policy implications. Our panel here, each is going to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about their background and their current company or organization. Jonathan? And why don't we actually introduce our friend here?
His old friend Ray Ray. Ray Ray is up for adoption, everyone. He's a beautiful dog. He's 4.5. Mm-hmm. 4.5. And yeah, come see us after if you're interested. And he was just trying to eat his leash, so freedom. Should I introduce myself? I'm Jonathan Ben-Samoun. I'm the founder and CEO of Fi. We build smart collar for dogs. Our collar does GPS tracking, location tracking in general, health tracking, sleep tracking, and it's also a social network for dog owners. Ray Ray is wearing one right now. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Go ahead.
Ellen.
I'm Ellen Jefferson, and I am the president and CEO of Austin Pets Alive and American Pets Alive. And we're an organization with a mission to eliminate the killing of pets in shelters, and we do that in two ways. One is at our shelter right down the road. If you have an excursion on your hands, go by and visit. But we do hands-on care there. We take animals in from euthanasia lists, both within our city government system, but also with government systems around the state, and bring them over to Austin Pets Alive for the care that they need to become adopted. And then the American Pets Alive is our national arm, and that is a part of our organization that is focused on really transforming the way government institutions handle homeless pets and changing it from the dog pound model, which is really based on rounding up as kind of pest control, rounding up unwanted dogs and cats, bringing them to a shelter and exterminating them if they can't find homes for them. And what we're trying to do is transform that into a institution that's really built around supporting humans and pets together, even if the pet is in the institution without a human visibly attached.
I feel like this could be the first walkable panel of South by Southwest, so I feel like Jonathan's going to take off in a minute.
Definitely.
Hi everyone, I'm Nick Stafford. I'm the CEO of Ollie. We are a next generation pet food brand. We truly believe in the humanization movement that's going on. So all the food we provide is human grade, so it's a fresh, highest quality, no preservatives, no fillers, no byproducts. And we're doing it to basically prolong the lives and fulfill the lives of gorgeous pups like Ray Ray.
That's going to happen.
Perfect timing.
I'll get some food, Ray Ray.
So I'm going to ask each of you, I'll start with you, Ellen. How have you noticed this humanization of pets in your work?
The humanization of pets, I think it's really fascinating because it's everywhere, and the industry is booming. And animal welfare is somewhat behind in that. And I think a really good example happened this last year with legislation. And I don't know how many of y'all are from Texas, but in Texas there was a bill that was brought forward to outlaw the use of chains for dogs that are tethered outside. And it went through the House with no problem, went through the Senate with no problem, and ended up on the governor's desk. And the governor vetoed it. And the reasoning behind that was that it violated property rights. And pets are property in Texas, and you can imagine Texans are very serious about property. And but interestingly, the whole world kind of lost their minds about it. And he
Very thirsty. Sorry.
he would like your human glass of water.
I got you. We're all good.
He's such a
Sorry.
niche drinker.
Look how cute he is.
Good.
Anyway, interestingly, everybody was outraged that this happened, and his donors called him, the public was outraged, and he reversed his opinion and passed the law. So The good news is that that happened, and I think that it is a door opening for almost rights for pets, because it does, this is the first time, at least in Texas history, that the right of a property owner was put aside for the right of an animal. So it's pretty exciting, actually.
Jonathan, how about you?
Yeah, I think we're seeing that in every single use case around our product, right? Like the way people interact with their dog is really much more as a child today than it was a few years ago, and every single survey and statistics is supporting that point. The dog is definitely a member of the family. I experienced that first with my own dog, right? Like as soon as you get a dog, you get that feeling of like sharing your experience and your day-to-day with something much bigger than just a piece of property. And I think that's a massive shift that's happening all across the different categories of our society. And that's definitely changing the behavior of customers a lot and of dog parents and creating a lot of opportunities in the space, for sure.
Nick.
I think in the food space, just to use a little sort of recent history, I think, to talk about human food and human trends and pet trends. I think if you think about food, 75 to 100 years ago, how did we feed our dogs? We would feed them with table scraps. We would feed them with leftover food. We would cook the same thing for them. And after the Second World War, human food and in turn pet food took on a more sort of industrial nature. New form factors were established. Longer distances had to be shifted. The food chain went from a very local one to a national one, and then in time, international one. That led to different types of food that we see. My Uber driver on the way here described it as a grand science experiment. I think you learned a lot from your Uber driver. And I like that. I think it has been 75 years of creating entirely different types of food. And that has kept prices very affordable, but sometimes it's been a balance with quality. And so if you think about pet food has gone through exactly the same industrialization. It's become a game of numbers, not quality. And so the very essence of our quality, of our being, is to disrupt that notion. And we're leaning into the trend that I think is happening today in human food, which is we're starting to think about the individual needs. We all are very unique characters and unique bodies, and dogs are exactly the same. And we're increasingly able to lean into what's right for us, what's right for our families, and what's right for the dogs in our family. So I think you've seen that continuation of this link between human and pet food. I think it's going to continue. I think we're going to lean into more customization. I think we're going to lean into more food trends around vegan, vegetarian food. We're going to lean into, obviously, where we are, which is sort of fresher and higher quality foods as well.
Excellent. So this leads to the next question. A recent market analysis referred to the pet market as recession resilient. And what is your take on this? I know you've seen a lot of growth over the last couple of years.
Well, I'm old enough to remember the recession that was in 2008 and 9. So pet food's remarkably resilient, actually, to recessionary times. So, and I think really that comes back to what Jonathan was talking about and what we all see here. Our eyes are all gravitated to Ray Ray. We feel the love. And so we look after that love accordingly. But in 2008 and 2009, pet expenditure didn't actually come down at that time. It actually grew 1% to 2%. It's growing much faster now. And then I would say a second thing as well, Lisa, which is I think what it's proved is it's also COVID-proof.
Yes.
We've seen a huge change. I mean, we're able to be here in sort of emerging COVID times, which is wonderful. But we've seen people spend more time at home. They've got to know their pets more. They're able to stay at home. There's probably some separation anxiety developing you're starting to see. But I think we should remember this is a great category. Investors feel that way. Consumers are also feeling the same way. They're really leaning into finding better food, better technology, better care for all of their pets and their pups. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Jonathan, how are things at Phi?
Yeah, I think it's exactly the same trend we're observing, right? Like, I mean, and it ties into your previous question. Like, if dogs are kids, kids are the last thing that you will look at on whether you have, available income or not. And during the whole period of COVID, we didn't really see any slowdown in the growth of our business or demand in general for the category. If anything, we have seen, like Nick was describing, like the ties between the dog parent and the dog getting closer and closer as people just spend more time with their dog. And I would say that as people come back to work, I don't know if the anxiety is on the side of the dog or on the side of the parent, to be honest. What we're seeing today is that people gravitate toward product like ours just because it gives them the peace of mind to feel like they are connected to their dogs when they are not there. And so going back into the office, I know a lot of people who just buy our collar just to make sure that the dog is safe at home, or make sure that they can open the app and see that the dog is still moving or having steps, or how much time did he sleep in the morning. And I think it's definitely like training in that direction.
Are there any ways that pet owners have surprised you?
I don't think there is any way they can stop surprising us. So in our case, I think the most surprising thing is the way they use the collar. We clearly designed this collar for dogs. We advertise it for dogs, and come on, we're expecting the cats, I think, but we're not expecting the pigs, the birds, the parrots, the goats, the horses, the cows. I think at this point we have like the whole Noah Ark on the Fi collar, and it's not perfect for birds. I'm sorry about that.
Too heavy? Is that what's not perfect?
Yeah, I mean, no, we literally have people design specific like ways to have that on like super small animals like turtles and birds and parrots. And we're like, your bird will have a little bit of a hard time flying with that.
Nick, how about you?
I think the number one thing is just this is just a wonderful space to be in. Like, I think the amount of love and attention and investment and time that people put into their pets constantly amazes me, actually. And, I was asking my team for a story this morning on, we get love letters to us, which is sort of thanks. And unfortunately, some of those are towards the end of pets' lives. And I was reading one this morning from a lady who was a beagle named Casey, who unfortunately passed away recently. But she was talking about the efforts she took to sort of prolong Casey's life. And in our interaction with her has been to give him the best diet in his twilight years. So I think that's the one thing. I think we really feel it as a team that we're sort of, and I'm sure everyone on the panel does, that we're really in the business of having a really positive impact on the world. And I think you see that very close up. And that level of love and affection is something that constantly surprises me.
Alan, how have pet owners surprised you?
In so many ways, as just like the other panelists here. And for us in the sheltering industry, we've seen that we've learned a lot since COVID started. We really haven't ever, nobody in our field has ever looked at the intake side of what's happening in shelters. We've always, like Austin Pets Alive even, we've always focused on getting the animals out alive and trying to find a way to get them out alive as fast as possible before they're killed. And through recent data, we've been able to, recent studies that have never been done. I mean, this is crazy. We're in 2022, and there's never been research into what is happening in shelters to this level. And some of the things that we found is that a study in San Antonio showed that the loose dogs that are out there, and San Antonio has a very big loose dog problem. And they followed the dogs around, and they found that 95% of them are cared for, well-fed, and healthy. And that they didn't follow them home, but what that means is that they have a person caring for them. They're not eating trash. They're not suffering from mange. And when you combine that with another piece of data that we've found since we started working on this movement of change, where we found that of the animals that were reclaimed from shelters by their owners, so a lost animal comes into the shelter, the owner goes and finds it, picks it up and brings it home. That's a very small set of data. But from that data, the vast majority of dogs are found within 1 block of their home. And then they're picked up by somebody, who knows, it could be animal control, could be Good Samaritan, picked up by somebody and then brought all the way across town to a shelter. And once they end up in the shelter, they only have a 15% chance of being reunited again with their owner. And for cats, it's only 2%. And so I think what surprises me the most is that we all have this sort of common rhetoric that loose animals, nobody cares about them, there's not enough homes for them, the best thing we can do is bring them to the shelter, and whatever happens there needs to happen. And we're missing this huge piece of the puzzle that people actually do care about these animals, and somebody's attached to them, and there's some disconnect that's happening in the car ride from the neighborhood to the shelter that's preventing them from getting home. And that could be DEI issues, like most animal shelters are run by police. And so there may be a real disconnect from people not wanting to go to an institution to reclaim their pet for fear of being registered or whatever. Or they may not know about it. We had a talk last night, and even Jonathan was shocked that dogs and cats are killed after 3 days of a stray hold. So they come into a shelter, they have 3 days for an owner to come and get them. That's it. And then that's either the end of their life, or they go into a live release program like Austin Pets Alive. So there's just a lot that I think it kind of fits into the recession question, is that this is wide open territory. There's so much room for innovation and knowledge finding to try to make the world better for all pets, both owned and unowned.
Absolutely. And so with the humanization of pets, we see a lot of potential to improve in those areas, but also a lot of room for innovation on the product front. And this means massive economic implications. Nick and Jonathan, what sort of pet products and services do you see arising in the next 5 to 10 years?
You want some?
After you, go for it.
Obviously, I mean, there are already a bunch of services that are like emerging pretty aggressively, right? Like what we're seeing is really all the existing services, that have been there for like 20, 30 years, are just kind of getting a version 2.0. So you start with like health insurance, health services in general, food, of course, technology a little bit more cutting edge, like ours, like wearables. But services like walking, boarding, I think as the dog and the pets in general are getting more integrated deeply into the household, there are definitely ways, like when I travel, I need someone to take care of my dog, right? And so I think the elevation of the overall expectations of what we want from our domestic companions is definitely aligning with all of these new services emerging, right? We want the best food, we want the best health care, we want to be able to take care of them if they have like a cancer or if they have a very costly procedure to be performed. We want them trained much better than before, right? We want to understand them better, and I think the elevation of our overall expectation of quality of their life and of our relationship with them comes with all of this opportunity for developing new services that we're seeing emerging now. I think the overall market and spend in the market grew from something about $25 billion around 2004 to $110 billion last year. This is not a market where we're increasing the size substantially. It's a market where people are spending more per capita per dog. So it's obviously very exciting.
Well, I think if I was, maybe I'll answer this question, what would I do today if I wasn't doing it? Or what should someone in the audience think about doing if they're up for a crazy entrepreneurial journey in the pet industry? I think there's an interesting opportunity for two things. Like, number one, I think you've got brands that are occupied in different parts of the industry. I think someone could come along and create sort of really powerful, I don't want to use the phrase meta brands, that's not what I mean, but mega brands, like larger brands that play across the categories, whether it's in care, whether it's technology, whether it's food, whether it's toys. I think there's going to be some trends there where people take pet way more seriously, I think, that it's being taken today. I think the second thing that would be interesting if I was an entrepreneur today is I would be thinking about data as it relates to pets themselves. What you talk about is unbelievably sad. That in the time today where we can communicate like that in an instant, that within 3 days we can't communicate clearly around a situation like that. I think, and we don't have the medical restrictions. I'm not a vet, so I don't want to misspeak around regulation here, but there's less concerns around privacy around medical records than are relative to humans. So I think something I would look at is, can you create a profile for every pet in the country? Can you create that profile for the purposes of getting them the right care they need? Can you create it for the purposes of finding out where they are if you lose them? Can you create it for the purposes of getting their medication right? Can you create it for the purposes of getting their personalized food right? That feels like a really doable and impactful thing to undertake. Again, we're a little busy, so maybe one of you needs to rise to the challenge and take on that one.
Awesome. Circling back to some of the concerns with pet policy. Alan, I know U.S. policy has historically treated pets like property. This is likely to shift as well, though. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you expect to see?
In terms of policy, yes, we've got so many needs, and this has been a really forgotten area of policy, just like shelters have been forgotten across the board for lots of things, but policy is a big place that needs support, and one of those places is, well, I would, even before jumping into that, I would touch on the veterinary piece that you're talking about. And as a veterinarian, when I went to school and we graduated, we felt like we had the right supply and demand of veterinarians and vet patients out there. And now, and the pandemic just expedited it like by 20 years that the industry really didn't see coming, the veterinary industry didn't see coming, and now there's a massive shortage of veterinarians, and it's compounded by so many people staying at home, so many people getting pets, pet ownership has gone up, so many people spending time with their pets and noticing problems and bringing them to the vet, and just a lot of veterinary workers not staying in the field. Like myself, I'm not practicing as a vet anymore. I'm the CEO of our organization. So in terms of policy, I think that there is a need for exploring other alternate ways to deliver pet care, health care to pets, rather than just through a veterinarian. And that is a really scary territory for my profession. But there's no way we're going to have enough veterinarians to treat the number of animals that need help anytime soon. Because even if they're talking about starting new schools and getting, adding students to classes and starting paraprofessional schools, all of that's going to take decades and decades to come to fruition. So I do think that there needs to be some legislative alternative. A lot of governments have the ability to treat animals in a emergency situation, but that may be something that we need to explore as kind of just day-to-day policy in the world. And a good example of that is in the shelter system. If an animal comes into the shelter with a medical problem, and you know the owner, like let's say the owner is right at the front door and they're saying, my dog just got run over by a car, I can't do anything to treat it, or I only have $100, I can't bring it to the vet because that won't cut it. And if the shelter takes that dog in, they're legally not allowed to give that dog back to the owner. So they bring it in, and in a no-kill city like Austin, they're going to bring it in, they're going to treat it, and then they have to adopt it to somebody else. And that is a law in the state of Texas that we're hoping to overcome, because shelters, but there's a lot of ins and outs to that, but I think the fear from the veterinary profession is that shelters will start doing veterinary care, which is exactly what I'm proposing further down the line, because there's not enough vets. The other thing that we see is the number one cause of owner surrenders is around housing. And there's so many pet restrictions, and a lot of them are endorsed by government, by local cities giving incentives for people to build, and then they're not mandating that needs to be an open policy building, condo, high-rise neighborhood that allows all types of pets. And so a lot of these pet restrictions, like Ray, too big, who knows what breed he is, all of those things prevent him from maybe following his owner to a new home. So those things, and it's actually a really interesting story. He was found in a home abandoned after his owners were evicted. And that is a really common thing too, is that when people are evicted, they're not allowed to get their pet out of the house because it's property and it goes with the house. So a lot of those animals also end up at the shelter. So there's all sorts of problems that need to be resolved. And then the last thing I would say is that there's a real need for community action and community support around creating a better world in government shelters. And because of this sort of, all these things that I'm mentioning, all of them come to a head within the government shelter itself. And they are handcuffed. They can't fix any of these problems because they're completely underfunded. And most governments don't prioritize animal services. They don't prioritize the care that we all give to our pets. There was another interesting study in San Antonio where citizens were asked to rank the city services in order of priority. Animal services was number 2 behind public safety. But the budgets in every city in America is about 0.2% of the general budget goes to animal services. And so that's preventing animals from coming into the shelter, that's caring for them once they come in the shelter, and that's providing outcome care. So there's a lot of government work that needs to be done, and I think as nonprofits, we try to shy away from that because we don't want to be in lobbying and we don't necessarily want to have any political battles, but it's a really, really important piece of what we're trying to accomplish.
I think we're running. I think we're going for it.
And ultimately, okay, I'll just keep going. Ultimately,
What platform is?
well, pie in the sky, the thing that would solve all of this is a ban on euthanasia for space. So if shelters were not allowed to euthanize animals for space, then they would have to fix these other problems. But because it costs $1.50 to euthanize an animal in a shelter, there's no incentive for governments to fix any of these problems that are leading to intake and bad outcomes of animals. And that is important because we now know from latest studies that have come out that there's actually 8 million more homes than there are pets in shelters. So this is not an overpopulation issue. There's not enough homes. None of that is real. It's just simply a lack of will to fix it.
And that ties back into what Nick was saying around data and sharing data in our times, right? Like, it's pretty incredible that with the amount of data we have and the capability we have, there is like a 1 to 8 imbalance, purely operational, just about supply and demand, that we cannot move these dogs at the right place to get adopted is pretty shocking.
Yeah.
I would like to transition into what pet companies can and should be doing to give back and to support this community where we can't necessarily influence the legislation directly. Jonathan, what has FI done to give back, and what do you hope to do in the future?
Yeah, we try to do our best. The first thing we're trying to do is avoid dog getting lost in the first place. So obviously, like the main value, like the first value proposition of our product is that if your dog escapes, you receive a notification on your phone, and then you're able to track the dog, and that's obviously very rewarding for us. Like you were talking about, good happy letters. Like, there is nothing better than receiving a note from an owner who lost their dog and we find them like half an hour later, sometimes in very dire situations. And so that's our first contribution. The second thing we're doing is trying to fix microchipping. Microchipping has been a pretty broken industry for years, and we developed a product that is low cost and that does exactly the same job for free, basically. Like, we commercialize a product called the FI Nano, which is a microchip that we give away or sell for $1 with free registration for life. I come from France. It's a country where you get a dog, you microchip your dog. It's actually required by law. So when I got here, I got really surprised to realize, and you were talking about legislation, like, this is something super simple that we could fix really fast and just mandate microchipping for every dog out there. What we discovered in that space also is that like 50% of the dog microchips are actually not registered properly within the microchipping service, which is completely absurd. So we designed a system, we just kind of rebuilt the whole system and made it entirely free, entirely automatic to register a dog with our FI Nano. We also have like different programs that we work with shelter around. We give 5 collars for free to every dog rescues that we can work with, and the parent adopting the dog is getting the 5 collar for free as well. And yeah, we're trying to do our best to like kind of like splash everything we're doing through the ecosystem and make sure that in addition to building our business, we're able to really drive toward the end goal, which is like no lost dogs. Right?
Excellent. And Nick, how about it, Ollie?
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, just in terms of our core mission, we're really trying to tackle what is a pretty high level of obesity amongst pets as well. We talk about the problems associated with pets today. About 56% of the pets in the US today are obese. And what that translates into is about a 20% shorter lifespan. It translates into 17% higher healthcare costs and a 25% higher amount spent on medication as well. So everyone's sort of suffering in that set of data. I think what we try and do, so first and foremost, I've always viewed the elegance of a business as a fast growth business, and the faster you grow, the more you can give. That's been a central philosophy of how I've spent my career. So one of the things that we do at Ollie is we donate a share of our revenue to food that goes towards shelters. This year we'll donate about $1 million towards that program. And that's really, we think, a helpful way to take these pups who've probably been in more challenging environments and try, one of the things, get them back on their feet in terms of good nourishment as well. We're also working really hard on sustainability as well. We want to be a company that has 100% recyclable product by the end of 23 as well. So I think it's across the board. It's for the dogs themselves, it's for the elements of the ecosystem, and then it's on the sourcing side.
Excellent. Despite some discouraging figures, I think we're making a lot of progress and moving forward, and it could only get better. I'm going to ask you guys a fun question. What is the silliest product you've ever bought for your pet? Who wants to go first?
Everybody looking at me. Yes. Silliest product. I bought Thor. My dog is a German Shepherd. I got him as a puppy. He was 3 months old. I got him a Chewbacca coat when it was snowing. He was probably 4 months. He wore it one time. I outgrew it in the next 2 weeks, literally. It was a very cute picture, though.
I love Halloween costumes for dogs and cats, actually, and the ones that have the little arms that stick out in the front. Have you seen those where it looks like a human?
So cute.
Yeah, that's my favorite.
Halloween is a whole industry in itself, I think. I'm actually going to steal something from someone who works for me. Noah has a wonderful dog called Charlie, and he's not an urban dog, but they live in New York, and Noah bought him some shoes. And we have a Slack channel at work called Dog Watch, which is obviously the most popular Slack channel at work. And the video of Charlie wearing his shoes is just genius. It's a ballerina. And then the funniest thing is he hears the footsteps. And so he's trying to work out who's behind him. It's just fantastic. If we had time, I would share it.
Awesome. I bought my dog a tiny cowboy hat for one picture. He didn't want to wear it, so I just snapped a quick photo. It was $2. Is there anything else any of you would like to add before we open it up to questions from the audience?
I would like to add that I think that the products that these two are developing and the products that are on the horizon and really pushing the industry forward, the commercial industry forward, I don't know if anybody in the audience is doing that as well, but you shouldn't underestimate the power of shelters and really it's kind of this sleeping giant that nobody's really touching. And something like the Fi collar is a really good example of that, where the collar is tracking steps and it's tracking, it's giving you information about the dog's health before you recognize that there's necessarily a problem. And that's incredibly important when we're dealing with animals that have been exposed to tons of illness coming from shelters. We pull animals every week from places like Laredo and McAllen, Texas, right real far south, and they are. They don't have intake vaccines. They don't do necessarily the right things to prevent things like distemper happening in dogs. And that's a disease that takes 4 months to run its course. And we don't have a really good way, other than trying to arm our fosters with here's what to look for, to monitor if they're getting sick. And then if they're getting sick, the things we're trying are actually working. So there's just a lot of innovation that can affect our world because we have such a concentrated element of it that then can, from a capitalistic point of view, can be used anywhere and shared anywhere.
Yeah, I think if I can add something is that like we shared some pretty grim messages here, but there is a massive opportunity there, and there is a lot of innovation coming in the field, and dogs are living longer. There are more dogs in the household than ever before. Like this is getting better and better, and I think there is a monster capitalistic opportunity to just build things that allow you to like realize your capitalistic endeavors, and at the same time do something pretty amazing when you wake up in the morning.
Let's open it up.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for this panel. You may have seen that survey this year, the main themes are NFTs, metaverse, and obviously there's potential application of what you described for the track records of health could be on the blockchain, and you could have all suppliers also feeding this blockchain and maybe having an NFT of your dog. You could have, maybe I'm curious about what your takes about the legal issues maybe about having an NFT of a dog, an actual dog. There's also applications about metaverse where you could have, you could learn about pet parenting with acceleration of time in the metaverse. You could see the effect of good pet food in the metaverse on your virtual pet. Hyundai also created a use case where actual robots could help you pet your dog in Paris while you're here. Curious about your take about NFTs, metaverses, Web3 related to pets.
Great.
It's an interesting question.
Yeah, I think the NFT thing, I'm going to just park on one side for the moment, but Meta in itself is a pretty big category. I think for me that comes down to experiences and education. I think like a couple of things that come to mind around that are, number one is, you can introduce the 1-to-8 ratio would be a very interesting challenge. You could sort of say we're never going to have an individual dog that's not matched to an individual potential pet parent. That struck me, and you could get a really strong visual cue from that, perhaps maybe from the pet parent of the dog rather than vice versa. That maybe that's a meta challenge to sort out. So that feels to me like a very interesting opportunity. I think also the metaverse has the potential to be a great source of information, frankly. I'm sure you get very frustrated, or you did when you were a vet, that like there's a vet and then there's Google. Like, can the metaverse play a role that's somewhere in the middle? Like, can it help facilitate conversations? Can it help facilitate expertise in a better way than it does today? Like, is there maybe this is a bigger question about Meta, but like, is there a purpose there that's for the positive, for education, for information, facts, science that could be unlocked there? I don't know about NFTs, your first part.
I don't either.
Yeah, I don't think there is any like direct application like for us right now, but it's a technology, right? It's an emerging technology. There are a lot of innovation happening there. We keep our eyes on that, and we see if there is anything we can leverage there. Like Ledger is definitely something interesting. Even if you think about adoption, traceability of the dogs, breeding, things like that. Today, kind of centralized around the AKC and other institutions who are like kind of like enforcing traceability of breeding. There could definitely be some innovation there.
Just one other thing, and I have kids, so I'm sort of living in they're 11 and 9, so we're right at that point where they're starting to really get into it. One of the games they play is called Adopt Me, and it's like, I think it's on Roblox, and like it's like the third most popular Roblox game in the world. So there is like a huge community of much younger kids who are going to become pet parents within a decade and are learning to think about pets in a very different way. And I know Roblox is not Meta, but that they don't see it differently. They will see that world very, very sort of in line with how they're currently experiencing it today. So I actually do think it's going to become very big, and maybe connection and the problem here that's being mentioned is maybe one of the big problems it'll solve.
Yeah, I think the hardest part about any technology like that is that a lot of the places that are still suffering with really high euthanasia rates some of them don't even have computers. And so we're sort of having to balance developing cities with trying to bring technology to solve the problem. But there's got to be a solution in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Mine is more of an idea than a question. big events like South by Southwest, ACL happening here in Austin, if you don't get your pet in boarding 6 months in advance, you're not going to get them in there. And so pets are either home or doing anything else. And I would love to see Austin Pets Alive come and get branded or partner with pet companies and host dog boarding during events like this. Because I take my dog Emma everywhere, and traveling with her and things like that. But I can't, if I travel with her, I can't board her in a city like Austin if she hasn't had a preview day prior to. And you have to book those months in advance. Yep. But I can imagine events like South by in the future as an opportunity to raise money. I would pay anything to have my dog here in Austin with me at a boarding facility while I'm going to facilities to raise money, but put together brands, put an FI collar on them while they're there so I can watch them during the sessions. Then I love it so much I buy it at the end of the day, and it's a win-win for pet owners, the local nonprofits, and the brands that want to be exposed to pet owners. It's just something to think about. I see it as a need in my generation of a pet owner who takes her dog everywhere.
Yeah.
I think that's a brilliant idea. You should look at our 70-year-old facility before you. Okay. Okay, great.
I think that's like really what you're describing is really what is happening in that environment. Like you're gonna see more and more of that experience of dog parents getting separated from their dogs and not accepting the status quo. And that creates a lot of opportunity, especially when you have people out there saying, I'll pay anything for it. Like this is just symptomatic of like markets emerging, and you will see airlines allowing dogs. You will see more method of transportation for dogs so you can travel with them. You'll see accommodations. We're already seeing that. Like the policy around hotels are bending completely in the favor of dogs now. Like this is just what the market is going to require, to remain competitive.
I just said the future of travel, like you said, pets.
Yeah.
Everything's pet. We're taking our pet on a 6-month road trip, and we rent Airbnbs that take pets.
Of course.
I've already looked at everything along the way where we can order, we can night away.
Wow.
We're not ready for us to come.
No, absolutely.
Hi. Yeah, totally believe in the humanization of pet trends. Just one quote. I'm not sure if you all saw during the pandemic, someone had that plants are the new pets, pets are the new kids, and kids are like exotic animals. You've got to be crazy or rich to have one. But so I guess with that, two-part question. Why do you think pet insurance penetration is so low in the US? It's at 1%. I've got my own thoughts, but would love to hear from all of you. I think in the UK it's around 10. In Sweden it's 40%, I think. And then the second part of that is anyone going after making like an HSA, FSA account where there's some sort of tax deductibility for vet expenses, given they're astronomical, and because right now I think it's only service animals that get that benefit from the IRS. So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm from the UK, so I hear you. It's one of those few trends that will go this way rather than that way. I think the gap's going to be closed very, very quickly. I think large insurance companies have slowly woken up to the opportunity here. Again, it's a capitalist opportunity. I think that gap will be closed in the next couple of years. I think the insurance companies are looking for growth. It's a new category that provides growth. I think they'll close down that category. I think you asked also, just on the HSA, FSA side, you're starting to see companies emerge that sort of have rainy day funds as part of their proposition that are doing very well. And so I think everyone sees the problem, the unexpected expense. I don't know the intricacies of setting up a HSA or FSA, but I think that's coming as well. I don't think it'll be driven by tax efficiencies. I think it'll be driven by the fear of a $3,000 vet bill more than anything. I think it's sort of a pseudo insurance product in many ways.
I think it's absolutely happening. You have like different forces working together. Some of them are favoring the emergence of this insurance product, and some of them are slowing them down. I think historically there is a very shady relationship, especially in the US, between consumer and insurance companies. And so there is a massive lack of trust in that space, and that's why you have a little bit like, it takes more time for these new companies to find traction in the market. But I think in parallel to that, you have like the emergence of new cures and new like opportunities of treatments for dogs that are demanded by the consumer, by the dog parent, and more dog parents who want to be able to pay and afford these treatments. And so you have to have like that insurance layer emerging in the middle, because if not, I mean, I think everyone who has a dog here knows how much it costs as soon as you get to the vet. And so, yeah, insurances are definitely going to emerge. It's going to take some time. I think I've seen from like 5 to 25 companies emerge in that space over the past few years. There will be some consolidation, but overall, I would expect that segment to close pretty aggressively.
I think also it's going to take a little bit of innovation on the veterinary part of that, because the paperwork end of insurance is something vets haven't really signed up for. So I think there's a lot of pushback from the industry itself on just even utilizing it. And there's not really standardization like human hospitals have for justifying the costs that needs to be taken care of too.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Adrienne. I just had a question for Nick and Jonathan. I know, Nick, when you answered the question about opportunities in the future, you talked about aggregation and also data. So I guess my question is, who's the most likely constituents within the ecosystem to be aggregating together? Because as we know, it's a very fragmented industry. So who are the most likely partnerships or constituents that you think could be aggregated? And then secondly, what are you doing with your customer data? And is there one insight you can share with us about what customers are needing or wanting that's not currently satisfied?
Some good meaty questions.
Yeah, I am very interested.
Yeah.
I was very much looking forward to this session, so those are my two main questions.
Let me take the first one. Maybe Jonathan take the second one on data. I think the reality is today the consolidation is happening at the private equity level, who are sort of building a house of brands. There's some early stage companies that are being funded to do the same thing, like Thrasio is doing for Amazon sellers. So I think there's going to be, at the top of the industry, there's going to be the big PE firms that sort of see that opportunity, which is a house of brand strategy, which is not what I'm saying, but I think that's close.
That's happening.
It's happening. I think you have Mars has their kinship vehicle that has some assets that potentially could mingle data with food, but they don't seem to have turned that into a standalone brand and a series of products. And as I said, at the bottom end, you've got some new emerging funds that sort of Thrasio equivalents. I'm not seeing what I'm talking about, though, in terms of true consolidation, about jumping over the silos. Logical ones to me actually are, I think, almost like there's technology and veterinary care. Strikes me as a really, really interesting one, because it's live data, it's data over a period of time. I separately see a food and care scenario as well. We, for example, offer any subscriber to Ollie, where a subscription service gets access to a televet 24/7. And so they're able to get the level Ellen was sort of referring to it earlier, which is saying some of the care can be provided remotely or digitally. So we do that today. Obviously, certain conditions or emergencies require an in-person visit. So we're starting to see that. I can tell you anecdotally, our customers love that.
Okay.
Because they love vets.
And access to vets is
They love access to vets, and they you know, as this lady said earlier, she's willing to spend to really look after her dog or dogs. I'm sorry, I don't remember, just one. So there's a logic there that vets provide that fabulous credibility associated with another brand that they trust. So I think those are the two areas that I see the biggest opportunity.
That's great.
Yeah, I think on the data front, data is just going to be the heartbeat of that new industry in general. Like you see vets, food, health in general, insurance, like all of these different segments that are developing, like their Docs 2.0 version is definitely going to be powered for customization. Like Nick mentioned customization in food earlier. I think customization is what's going to dominate that industry in that new revolution. It's going to be food for your specific dog versus food for big dogs. It's going to be healthcare, especially for your specific dog, insurance for your specific dogs, depending on like the activity level, weight, is its routine, what makes him at risk versus not, and all of that relies on data. So I think in our case, it's absolutely part of our strategy to aggregate that data and create value for our customers about their dogs, because and I'll get to that in 1 second, and second for like other partners in the ecosystem. And on the first side, I think what's really important to realize is that there is very little we know about dogs. And there is very little research that has been done in that space in general, right? And if you take something like as simple as activity or sleep, there is very little information, especially when you take it at the breed level or at the age group level, on like how much dogs should exercise or sleep. And so something that we see already emerging in our product very, very obviously is like we're able to aggregate that data and deliver it to our FI owners to help them take better care of their dogs, right? So all of a sudden, if you go to your vet and you have a dog and you ask them, how much should I walk my dog? They'll give you a number, right? They'll be like, hey, between half an hour and an hour per day, right? And depending on the breed, probably have like some adjustment to that recommendation based on like, breed, size, age of the dog, condition of the dog, right? I can give you a terabyte of data about dogs similar to your dog everywhere in the US and tell you where your dog is positioned exactly in terms of activity. And I'm not telling you how much you want to walk him, but I can tell you how the other dogs are walking, at what time, for how much. And I can say the same thing for nap time, nighttime. I can tell you how many times they wake up at night to go drinking. This is like the next chapter of information about dogs.
That's interesting compared to other dogs.
Yeah.
Because that's the value.
We're basically establishing like the baseline for what is the behavior of dogs out there from the bottom up. We're just observing dogs with data.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
We only have about 5 more minutes, so hopefully we can get through a couple more questions. But before we get cut off, do you want to share your contact information in case anyone wants to reach out in the future?
Sure, my phone number.
No.
You can reach me at jonathan@tryfi.com, tryfi.com.
And I'm ellen.jefferson@austinpetsalive.org.
And I am Nick, Nick, @myotley.com.
Okay, great.
It's funny, I just came up here to talk about privacy and then you... But I'm taking notes, by the way, I'm not playing games. So I'm a lawyer and I work with a lot of clients, including some in the pet industry. And I'm fascinated to hear the things that you're saying because they're in line with what I think my clients are seeing. This session is obviously not a privacy and data session. However, it came up. And I'm curious from your standpoint, there's data and what you're doing with it, but then I'm wondering, in your experience here in the US, are you hitting barriers because you just don't really know what to do because of the commingling of owner data and pet data? And it's like, gosh, there's so many things we could do with the data that we're collecting, but it's connected to a person. And how can we separate those and use them and not get in trouble? So I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I can start with that.
Okay, go for it.
We're dealing with very sensitive data, obviously. We're dealing with location of the dog, where the dog is, rapport of the owner, typical activity of the dog. We're tracking where they are actually all the time, right? And so we're being extremely careful with that data for sure. But we're also being very careful in the type of features and product features we're building, even if it's for the owners themselves. So I think there are 2 types of data and productization of the data you can do, right? Like the first level is for the owners themselves. And I think in that sense, you can be a little more aggressive and take a stance where you're like, hey, here's what, everything we know about you, kind of. And there is more aggregated data across the network, what I was describing before, where it's totally fine to make aggregate reporting, but like where we completely stay away from individual surfacing of private, like any kind of private information, or even anonymous private information in the network. We just show, we'll show you all German Shepherd in that age group. We'll never show you like one specific dog. Does that make sense? And so to be honest, I don't think it's slowed us down. I think we've been very conscious of this, and I think especially in our roadmap, when we're trying to think about new features, are certainly we could build some very cool thing where people can share their walk and meet on walk with their dogs and things like that. We're just trying to be very careful about that. And every time we build any kind of feature, really make sure to think, how can this be abused in any way, shape, or form?
In our industry, it's a micro level to what you're talking about, but we're really hampered by the ability to not get addresses or phone numbers from the government shelters about the animals that have come in. So we can't call them, and when errant shelters accidentally give it to us, we can often call that person and make a connection and say, well, hey, we fixed the leg, you want it back? Even though that's against the law. But we are trying to make those connections, and it's really, it's a big problem, yeah. Microchips are the exception to that, right?
I think they covered it pretty well in the,
Take another question?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just curious about how you see technology helping the overall shelter experience, just optimize some of the struggles you've experienced and that sort of thing within the shelter specifically.
Sure, there's so much. I think that one really, not easy, it's probably really hard, but the data software systems that we have that we use in the shelter business are built for jails. And so they're not built for the individualized, customized care of an animal from intake to outcomes. And if we can figure out how to create something like that, that is a pathway planner for each animal, a lot of the animals get stuck in the system because there's not it's not like a hospital where you're pushed from one room to the other. Everybody's focused on trying to empty that bed to get another patient in. That doesn't happen in the shelter system. And if there's software that can help create that, I think that would be massive improvement. There's so many things. Even just walking dogs in our shelter, we have to use a whiteboard. It's all manual, having some way to open the gate and click that this dog has been out for X number of minutes. Even from a management point of view, it'd be great to be able to see that every dog's been walked and this is how long they were all walked. And we can't get any of that information.
The previous statistics around 1 million dogs getting killed every year in shelters and 8 million parents looking for a dog is just an absurdity, right? It's like the very simple process of looking for dogs available in shelter, that should be cracked. It's pretty incredible that it's not. And only that, I think it's a massive opportunity.
Mm-hmm. And so, and for these shelters that don't have the people power to take photos and put them on the internet, maybe there's some camera system that they can install in their shelter to snap photos of animals coming in and somehow assign them so people can have sort of a do-it-yourself shopping from afar. Because there's places that are killing easy animals. There was 2 puppies in our conference room yesterday that came from a shelter where they were on the euthanasia list, and they're scruffy, white, like little terrier things, puppies, and nothing wrong with them. So, anyway, there's a lot.
Got one more, okay. I had 2 questions. I'll skip the depressing one and just ask you about the one for sustainability and recycle in especially the dog food realm and the feed realm. So as your market share grows, do you expect them to ask for more, I know you said hormone-free chicken, but more free range, where your sourcing will cost you more? And then do you also see that whole sustainability, everything applying to the other markets for any other pet products, like toys and all that stuff, want to use recycled goods and I'll add a little addendum, sorry. And do you see it happening for chickens and stuff, for backyard poultry and all that stuff? Do you see that people wanting more premium products in that area as well?
So I can tell you there's a company we really do focus on sourcing responsibly. That's both who it's sourced from and also the quality of it. And to be really candid, that's hurt us a great deal in the last year. The price of turkey has gone up 125% in 21. The price of lamb went up 100%. Beef and chicken are up about 45-50%. And we've absorbed those costs before passing them on to the customer because we do not want to take the alternative path, which is go down to a lower quality of product. Our recipes are very meat rich, and so actually unlike some of the lower quality pet food that's out there, they have less exposure to that meat, those protein price increases. So we're committed to that. A lot of it is around packaging and distribution. We deliver directly to people's homes, so there's always a great opportunity to make that more of the packaging, more of the liners. Like our liners are 100% recyclable. The box is pretty close, it's compostable. The actual packaging itself is the next big thing for us. What was the second part of your question around other?
So it's like, do you see that same, because the fresh dog food was boutique, you know, not that long ago. Do you see it applying to like backyard farming, you know, the urban coops movement and all that stuff? Like even for like the ancillary products like litter, like wanting to use recycled byproducts from other agricultural endeavors.
Yeah, I think it's not a market I know, but I think the basis of it is you look at the addressable market. So if you look at the pet food market, Jonathan was saying earlier, it's a $110 billion industry. About $35 billion of that is food. Fresh food is a sort of $3 billion market growing to probably like $6 billion. We believe that our brand stands for more than just fresh, so we will be expanding in terms of products. I think anyone that operates in that space, they'll have to have a look and see what's emerging. What they'll probably find is there's probably like someone doing like 30 or 40 million who's growing very quickly, and you can sort of see that trend that's coming. I will tell you there are some trends like that are happening in the pet space. For example, insect protein is an incredibly interesting alternative protein. It is so much better for the environment. You need considerably less water for the insects. They have a much higher yield from a protein level than cattle does. So that's an example. Again, I don't know the exact space, but that's an example of something. So I see that. I'd watch out for that becoming something that much bigger over the coming years.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and thank you to our wonderful panelists.